The night air was crisp, carrying the scent of rain that had fallen earlier in the evening. The street lights flickered dimly along the narrow, winding road leading to the prestigious neighborhood of Crestwood Hills. Richard Calloway, a self-made millionaire known for his keen business acumen, stepped out of his grand estate, keys in hand, ready to take his midnight drive, a habit he had formed over the years to clear his mind. As he approached his sleek black sports car parked in his driveway, a sudden figure emerged from the shadows. A young, disheveled boy, no older than 12, with tattered clothes and a wary yet determined gaze, stood in his path. Richard stopped in his tracks, his grip tightening on his keys. "Hey! Step away from my car!" Richard barked, his voice sharp with irritation. The boy hesitated for a moment, but then took a deep breath, his resolve strengthening. "Sir, please don't drive your car. Your brake is cut. Your neighbor," he blurted out, his voice filled with urgency. Richard's brows furrowed, a mix of skepticism and annoyance flashing across his face. "What? Who are you? What are you talking about?" "Your neighbor, Mr. Harding. I saw him. He was messing with your car just 10 minutes ago. I sleep across the street, behind the bushes. I saw everything." Ethan had spent months sleeping across the street, behind the bushes, and sometimes in the alleyways near the wealthy neighborhood. He often overheard conversations between residents and workers, picking up details about their lives. Mr. Harding, being one of Richard Calloway's direct neighbors, had a reputation in the area. Ethan had seen him many times, barking orders at his staff, making phone calls, and occasionally exchanging tense words with Richard. So, when Ethan saw Harding sneaking around Richard's car that night, he recognized him instantly. The fact that Ethan said his name without hesitation was due to months of observation, even if he had never spoken to Harding before. Richard scoffed, glancing at the boy's ragged appearance. "And why should I believe a homeless kid?" The boy took a step closer, desperation evident in his eyes. "Because if you don't, you're going to crash. Please, just check." Something in the boy's tone made Richard hesitate. With an exasperated sigh, he stepped forward and crouched beside his car, inspecting the brakes with the flashlight on his phone. His pulse quickened when he saw it, a clean, precise cut in the brake line. Cold dread settled in his chest. His mind raced. Mr. Harding? His charming, seemingly friendly neighbor? Why would he do this? His jaw tightened as realization dawned on him. Harding had recently lost a major deal to Richard's company. Was this revenge? Richard turned to the boy, his suspicion replaced with genuine gratitude. "What's your name, kid?" "Ethan." "Ethan, you just saved my life." The boy exhaled a shaky breath, relief washing over him. I just couldn't let you drive away. I had to say something." Richard pulled out his phone and dialed the police, his sharp mind already formulating a plan. Moments later, red and blue lights painted the driveway as officers arrived. Mr. Harding, caught off guard, was soon confronted with the evidence. With Ethan's testimony and security camera footage, the police had all they needed. Before Mr. Harding could escape from his house, having noticed the presence of the police at Richard's house, the doors swung open, and 2 officers walked in. He was soon escorted out in handcuffs. His face was pale, his usual arrogance replaced with sheer panic. His eyes landed on Richard, then Ethan, and something dark flickered in them. "You think this changes anything?" Harding hissed. "You have no idea what you've just started." Richard took a step forward, his expression unreadable. "I don't need to start anything. You ended this yourself." Harding scoffed as the officers pulled him away, but Richard's attention was now on Ethan, who stood there watching the scene unfold. "You're coming with me into the house," Richard said firmly. "Let's get you something warm to eat." Ethan blinked, his throat tight with emotion. "Are you sure?" Richard nodded. 100%. Harding was handcuffed and taken away, his feeble protests drowned out by the weight of justice. Richard Calloway had a family, a wife Emily, and a daughter Madison. However, his workaholic lifestyle had strained his relationship with them. He had missed countless family dinners, school events, and moments that truly mattered. Emily had warned him repeatedly that his obsession with business would cost him more than he realized, and their marriage was on thin ice. As the chaos settled, Richard turned to Ethan. "Where do you stay?" Ethan shuffled his feet, hesitating. Wherever I can. My mom, she passed last year. My dad left way before that. I just survive." A lump formed in Richard's throat. He saw something in Ethan, a fire, a resilience that reminded him of his own struggles as a boy from a poor background. A decision crystallized in his mind. "Come with me," Richard said firmly. "I think we can change that." Ethan's eyes widened. What do you mean?" Richard smiled for the first time that night. "I mean, you saved my life, kid. Now let me return the favor. You deserve a chance. Let's start with a warm meal, and then we'll figure out the rest." Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes, but he blinked them away. For the first time in a long time, hope flickered inside him. That night, everything changed, not just for Richard, but for Ethan as well. Two lives, once strangers, were now intertwined by fate, by a single act of bravery, and by the unwavering belief that sometimes, the most unexpected heroes emerge from the shadows. Meanwhile, Mr. Harding, who has now been taken away by the police, after his house was searched, with him present, showed no remorse. However, Detective Harris and his partner Detective Liam stayed behind to ask Richard some questions. The tension in the room was thick as Richard Calloway, still shaken from the confrontation, looked at the young boy who had saved his life. Ethan fidgeted with the hem of his worn-out hoodie, his eyes darting between Richard and Detective Harris, who was flipping through the documents retrieved from Mr. Harding's home office. Richard exhaled deeply, rubbing his temples. "Ethan," he said gently, "do you have any idea why he would do this? Why my own neighbor wanted me dead?" Ethan hesitated before nodding. "I overheard him on the phone a few times. He said you were expanding your company, and he was scared you'd push him out. Something about shares and a merger?" Detective Harris exchanged a look with his partner. "That would make sense. Harding was on the verge of financial collapse. If your company moved forward, his stocks would plummet." Richard clenched his fists, his voice laced with frustration. "So he tried to kill me instead of negotiating? Instead of talking to me?" Ethan swallowed hard. People do crazy things when they're desperate. A heavy silence filled the room until Detective Harris straightened, signaling his partner. "We need to ask Mr. Harding some more questions. If this boy is right, this isn't just attempted murder, it's premeditated." As the detectives moved swiftly, leaving for the station, Richard turned to Ethan, his expression softening. "You saved my life tonight." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to say. I did what anyone would do." Richard shook his head. "No, Ethan. Not everyone would have the courage to stop a stranger, to put themselves in danger like that." He reached into his pocket and handed Ethan a card. "I don't know what your situation is, but if you ever need anything, a home, an opportunity, you call me." Ethan hesitated, his fingers gripping the card as if it were a fragile lifeline. I don't know what to say." "Thank you so much." Richard smiled. "Just say you'll think about it." Mr. Harding was formally charged with attempted murder, tampering with a vehicle, and conspiracy to cause harm. The courtroom was tense when the trial began. Harding's defense attorney argued that there was no solid proof that Harding personally cut the brakes, implying that someone else might have done it. However, Detective Harris and the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence: surveillance footage from nearby traffic cameras, footage from the hidden camera at Richard's house, testimony from Ethan about what he saw that night, and even a recorded phone call Harding had made to a mysterious associate, discussing how Richard Calloway wouldn't be a problem much longer. Ethan was called to the stand as a key witness. Despite his initial nervousness, he confidently recounted the events of that night, explaining how he had seen Harding crouched near the car moments before Richard attempted to leave. The jury was captivated by the story of a homeless boy who risked everything to save a man he didn't even know. Mr. Harding, realizing the evidence against him was too strong, broke down under cross-examination. I couldn't let him destroy everything I built," he shouted in desperation, admitting that Richard's business expansion would have ruined him financially. With his confession, the case was all but sealed. The judge sentenced Harding to 15 years in prison for attempted murder and conspiracy. The courtroom buzzed with reactions as Harding was led away in handcuffs, his once proud demeanor completely shattered. Deeply moved by Ethan's bravery and sacrifice, Richard decided to change Ethan's life for the better. Instead of letting Ethan return to the streets, Richard invited him to live in his guest house, ensuring he had a safe and comfortable place to sleep. Richard learned that Ethan had dropped out of school a year ago due to his unstable home life, and with his mom passing, he hired a private tutor to help him catch up and later enrolled him in a good school. With Ethan's father disappearing even before his mom passing, leaving him to survive on his own, Richard used his resources to track down Ethan's estranged uncle, who had been searching for him for years. Though Ethan was hesitant at first, he eventually reunited with his uncle, who welcomed him with open arms. Months after the trial, Richard sat at the dinner table with his wife Emily, daughter Madison, and Ethan. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about business deals or expansions, he was simply present, enjoying the company of people who truly mattered. As they laughed over a story Madison told, Richard looked at Ethan and smiled. "You changed my life, kid," Richard admitted. Ethan grinned. "Guess that makes us even." Richard chuckled, shaking his head. "No, Ethan. I think I still owe you." And for the first time in a long while, Richard Calloway felt truly grateful, not just for his wealth, but for the second chance he had been given, all thanks to a boy who had once been invisible to the world. Richard didn't just want to help Ethan in the short term, he wanted to secure his future. A few years later, after seeing Ethan's intelligence and quick thinking, Richard offered him an internship at his company. Ethan worked hard, impressing everyone with his determination and sharp mind. Over time, Ethan became more than just the boy who saved Richard's life, he became family. What do you think about Ethan's bravery? Share your thoughts in the comment section. Also tell us where you are watching from. And if you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and hit the subscribe button. Do not forget to turn on the notification bell for more inspiring stories.